This road looks like it leads absolutely nowhere. No signs, no people, no signal. But at the end of it is one of the most infamous hideouts in American history. See, right out here in the middle of the California desert is the last place that Charles Manson ever tried to disappear. And today, I'm walking straight into it. That's kind of creepy. To even reach the spot, you have to travel on one of the roughest roads in Death Valley. And that isolation is exactly why the Manson family chose this location. But what finally brought law enforcement all the way out here probably isn't what you would expect. And the place where it all unraveled is hidden just beyond these mountains over here. Getting to Barker Ranch isn't easy. It's remote, poorly marked, and requires driving on long stretches of dirt road with little to no signage. If you're using Google Maps, I highly recommend downloading the area for offline use before you leave. There's no reliable cell service out here that I found. You'll also want to check the weather before attempting this drive. An SUV or truck with high clearance is pretty much a requirement. I should also say this is simply the route that I took, and I've heard of alternative ways in, although I don't have experience traveling those routes. So definitely do your homework before attempting this trip, because there may be an alternative route that's better for you. That said, I took Trona Wild Rose Road starting from the town of Trona, driving north for roughly 19 miles until hanging a right onto Ballarat Road. Go straight, and if you pass this lonely radar installation out here in the desert, you'll know you're on the right track. From there, you'll drive through the old mining town of Ballarat, which at its peak in the early 1900s had a population of nearly 500 people, but today is almost completely abandoned. According to the historical marker nearby, at one point, Ballarat was a functional town complete with a Wells Fargo station, post office, school, jail, morgue, 3 hotels, and 7 saloons. When a nearby mine suspended operation in 1905, the town's population rapidly declined until it was officially declared a ghost town in 1917. Just another reminder of the enormous footprint mining left on the desert landscape here. Once you enter Ballarat, I followed the sign for Goler Wash Road. When you turn onto that, it's roughly an hour of driving through some desert terrain on a dusty road. A couple days before I came out here, the area had been hit with heavy rain and the drive was incredibly scenic. Some of the dry lake beds had actually filled with water, but parts of the road were clearly washed out, making high clearance absolutely necessary. Just another reminder, check the weather before you come. Between the heat, sudden storms, flash flooding, and the total lack of services out here, conditions can turn dangerous quickly, so preparation isn't optional. After what Google Maps says is 18.7 miles from Ballarat, I took a left on what's marked on maps as Coyote Canyon Road, although there was no signage indicating that. The road climbs into the mountains and leads to the mouth of Goler Canyon, the start of a rugged off-road trail cut through these peaks known as the Steps. So I'm at this point where I'm driving through this valley here, and it's getting pretty rugged. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get much further because the sign down here says the road's washed out. And I don't know for sure if my car can handle the rocks up here because there's some pretty jagged rocks in the road and you have to have some pretty high clearance. It's kind of eerie being here. You see all these old busted car parts around here. I tried to go up a little bit through the canyon, but it's just so washed out right now. So I may have to just hike the rest of it because the road looks really rugged up ahead, and the last thing I want is to get stuck out here because there's nobody around to help me get out if that happens. One thing that's kind of interesting, I know Manson and the family that lived up here were known for stealing cars and dune buggies and doing whatever, and there's a lot of car parts around. See a lot of just rusted old car parts lying around the desert up here. I'm not sure how many of those are from the Manson family. You know, they were up here over 50 years ago, so it's possible that the cars they sold and chopped up have been taken away or people have taken them as souvenirs, but there's quite a bit of kind of car junk up here, so it makes you wonder if any of it was related to the Manson family. If I'm correct, I looked on the maps, I'm about less than 5 miles away, so we're gonna hike in to try to get to Barker Ranch. It's just amazing how remote it is here. The road getting here is not an easy one to drive on, and I haven't seen anybody the whole time I've been here, not one ranger, not one camper or other tourists, so it's really out here And this is the winter too, when it's cooler. I can't even imagine during the summer when it's blazing hot. This area is pretty dangerous to get stranded out here in the wild in the summer. This area gets upwards of 100 degrees. But we're gonna continue on and try to make it to Barker Ranch by foot. This part of California has some interesting history. There was a lot of mining activity that went on around here. Still mining activity, but probably not nearly as much as there was around the late 1800s. And you see a lot of these old mining villages that popped up and have since been abandoned. You pass one or two on the way here. Thousands of people live there, and they just kind of dried up overnight. Very much a boom and bust area. But I can imagine all these roads are probably remnants of that mining era where they built roads in to extract whatever they were getting at in these hills. This place is pretty creepy given its history. Along the route you see a bunch of caves like this. I can't even imagine living out here in such a remote place, just digging in the ground looking for whatever. Peaceful, but probably really hard work. Over there it's hard to see, but there's these holes in the rocks that almost look like lookouts. I'm sure they're just remnants of the old mining activity that went on here back in the day. These people were probably digging in these hills all over trying to find stuff. But it's kind of creepy given this area has more recent history to think that there were lookout places dug into the rocks. Another old mine here. I wonder how long that one's been there. Looks like it has some sort of pulley system or line that goes all the way to the top of that ridge. Lots of mines here. Not sure how old this one is, but it's pretty cool. Looks like it's in decent shape. Kind of. At one point, somebody spent a lot of time here in this ridge, chipping away at these rocks up here, trying to get rich. What a place to work. Not easy work. More mining equipment. So much discarded waste out here. So many people were out here at one point trying to strike it rich, digging away at these hills. And when they didn't, they just got up and left. And probably left all the mining equipment here. Most of the structures they built. Here's another stone wall. I'm not sure exactly what this was. Some sort of basin or room. Could have been somebody's house, I don't know. See lots of barrels out here, just random junk just baking out here in the elements. It's almost like archaeological ruins at this point. Just remnants of a bygone era when this area was filled with people out here digging around, trying to strike it rich. And maybe it worked out for some of them, maybe it didn't work out for a lot of them, but all this stuff is what's left out here. There's all these kind of cables going from hillside to hillside, which I'm assuming they probably were digging stuff and sending it down like on a zip line. You can see these piles of rocks over here, which looks like at one point somebody was digging out that area. So it's pretty interesting walking through here. It's almost like a museum of industry that once dominated this area, and thousands of people came here to mine these hills and try to strike it rich, make a living for themselves, and it's all just been abandoned, much like the area we're headed to right now. Here's another one of these cables that's wrapped around this rock here, and it goes all the way up there. Probably some sort of area where they were digging out. Still tied to this rock. I'm sure, I can imagine they dig stuff out from up there, send it on down the line in some sort of bucket or something like that, like a zip line, instead of carrying it down, which is pretty smart. It's probably a lot easier that way. Let gravity do the work. It's kind of cool. I was walking and I found this rock, and you can kind of see some shininess in there. Oops, hard to focus on that. Kind of looks like silver. This may have been something they were looking for, obviously on a larger scale. Another mine shaft right there, or some sort of contraption that was used for mining. Some sort of well over there. So this place is called Newman Cabin, and I have no idea what the history is behind it, but I'm assuming it used to be a cabin that one of the miners who worked this area used to live in, and nobody's living here obviously anymore, but it's tucked away in these hills, and this is all that's left. That's kind of creepy. So I'm guessing that's the remnants of a cabin that a miner who worked these hills used to live in, but it's since been turned into a sort of Charles Manson shrine, and maybe shelter if you need it, if you get stuck out here, which hopefully doesn't happen. And there's also a missing persons poster in there, which is a little creepy when you're out here by yourself. But we're gonna keep moving on to Barker Ranch because I think we're only 2 miles away now. So it's starting to open up a little bit. We just got out of that little canyon area, and I'm approaching an area that's called Keystone Mining Camp. At least that's what it says on Google Maps. But it looks like it was an old mining camp. I don't really know much about it because I have no service and I can't really look up any information on my phone about it. But you can see one of the buildings there. It has all the trappings of an old mining camp, I guess. Kind of lots of junk laying around, some old buildings, things like that. I'm sure at one point there were probably a fair amount of people who were up here working, digging in these hills in this mine camp. It actually looks a little bit more modern than some of the other ones, or maybe a little bit more built up because there's more stuff. It looks like the whole hillside up there has been kind of excavated, and you can see there's kind of a decent sized structure here, more of a structure than some of the other buildings. Looks like there's the mining operation up there. An old fridge. This looks like this was a kitchen area. Some nice views at least. Well, we're going to move on. It's pretty amazing all the structures out here that are still standing, all the activity that was going on out here at one point that's just been abandoned. It's a real fixer-upper right here. Thing's been shot to bits. You can barely even tell it's a truck anymore. So it looks like I'm officially entering Death Valley National Park, and here's the sign to prove it. There's a little fork in the road, and I'm not exactly sure which way I'm supposed to go because there's no signs, but I think I'm just going to keep to the left, and hopefully this is the right way. I'm not exactly sure, but I think we're half a mile away, if I had to guess. So we're getting close. Getting close to Barker Ranch, and the place where Charles Manson and the family had their last stand before he was sent to prison. So after I took the left at the fork of the road, there is a sign here that says Barker Ranch on it. So we're headed the right direction. And it looks like it's 1 mile away. So we're going to continue on down this road, and hopefully soon we'll be at Barker Ranch. It's way out here. This is really remote out here. No cell service. I haven't seen anybody the whole time I've been out here. Very remote. And quite peaceful and tranquil too. It's the desert landscape out here is really beautiful actually. So it's quite a nice hike. But I definitely wouldn't want to do it during the summer. This area of Eastern California is known as the Panamint Range. It's a rugged mountain chain rising out of the northern Mojave Desert. And when I say it's remote here, I mean it's remote. There's no service, really no shade, and not really that many signs. So you're really quite out here in the middle of nowhere. Mostly just wind, rocks, and miles of silence. Today, Barker Ranch is forever linked to the Manson family, but its story started long before Manson ever set foot here. Back in the 1940s, a couple named Bluch and Helen Thompson built a tiny cabin out here, basically a glorified mining storage shed. Later, the Barker family bought this property and turned it into a modest desert getaway, a quiet retreat made of stones and wood, tucked deep into the middle of nowhere. And I don't think anyone would have predicted that this place would end up tangled in one of the darkest chapters in the 1960s. To get here, you have to drive up the Goler Wash, a narrow rocky canyon that feels less like a road and more like nature's obstacle course. Parts of it used to be so bad that early off-roaders called them the steps, and you need a serious 4x4 to get over them. It's said that back in the 1960s, the Manson family would come ripping through this area on stolen dune buggies, vandalizing park property, hiding out in abandoned mines, shooting guns, and from what I read, just causing chaos. In fact, what's interesting is that initially it wasn't the murders that the family committed that got law enforcement's attention out here. It was their wild behavior and stolen vehicles. So we're getting close to the ranch now. We're walking over this hill, and now I can see some structures over there. This is all that's left of Barker Ranch, the place where Charles Manson and the family hid out and were arrested. It's quite a peaceful area, actually. Some nice trees. It's very remote. Just gonna walk up on this hill and try to get a view of the whole area. I'm not gonna lie, it is a little creepy here though. Knowing who is here and knowing that very likely the murders that Manson and the family committed were planned right here. It definitely has a creepy vibe here. I guess these are pictures, old pictures of what the place looked like when the family was living here. It's like there's a bus here. It looks like the building up there before it was burned down. Some weird animal thing. Yeah, it's kind of creepy here. Not gonna lie. This looks like it was some sort of chicken coop or something. Surrounded by mountains, you can see why they thought they could vanish here. Even today, it feels like this is the type of place you could hide out in and nobody would have any idea where you are. And I can imagine in 1969, there were even less people in the neighboring area. I mean, just getting here from the main road, you have to drive at least over an hour on some really rough terrain, so it's really hard to get out here. Not including the hike, obviously. I don't know, looking at this area, my guess is if they just laid low and weren't acting all crazy, bringing attention to themselves, they probably could have hid out here for a really long time. Apparently on the sign over there, it says that one of the main things that tipped off the police that they were out here was they burned some roadside equipment. And I guess that the police started to get involved and also linked that to some auto thefts in the area. So that's apparently the reason why the police and rangers came up here to arrest them, because they were just acting all crazy. But if they would have just laid low, they probably could have stayed here for a while. And it wasn't until after Manson was arrested that the police put the pieces together and realized that they were involved in the murders in Los Angeles. Most of the wooden structure right here burned down in 2009. The cause is still debated, but the stone foundations are still here. The Barkers, the people who actually own this place, use this place as a quiet desert vacation getaway or cabin. But when the Manson family arrived in 1969, it suddenly became something very different. The headquarters where Charles Manson began shaping his helter-skelter prophecy, an apocalyptic race war he believed he could trigger through a series of murders. I think just about everybody watching has at least heard a little bit about how that turned out. What's important to note is that, according to everything I've read, the property's owners, Arlene Baker, truly believe these were just musicians at the time who needed a quiet place to rehearse. She had no idea that the Tate and La Bianca murders were being planned while they were staying here. And honestly, I think that's probably believable because Manson was known for being incredibly persuasive, so I'm sure he was quite the storyteller. He even gave her a gold record from the Beach Boys, which may or may not have been stolen from Dennis Wilson. The year before 1968, the family had been living in a nearby spot called Mayer's Ranch, but they eventually moved here to Barker Ranch because it offered more shelter and more privacy. All right, so this is probably the most infamous spot on the entire property. This is where Charles Manson was found during the raid. Somewhere here. Not running, not fighting, hiding, under a bathroom vanity. Imagine that, one of the most notorious criminal figures of the 20th century pulled out from under a sink in the middle of the desert. And here's the truly wild part. The rangers who raided this place didn't even know who they had at first. They weren't hunting a cult leader. They weren't hunting a mastermind. They were just trying to shut down a group of wild desert vandals. For months, the family had been tearing through Death Valley, stealing vehicles, firing guns, trashing parklands, ripping around on dune buggies like they owned the place. That reckless behavior is what finally brought the National Park Service, California Highway Patrol, and the Inyo County Sheriff out here. Not the crimes everyone would later know them for. Just stolen cars and chaos. Even now, you can still find vehicle debris scattered around the ranch. It's hard to say which parts, if any, are actually connected to the family. Manson was arrested here more than half a century ago, and this place has been picked over by time, weather, and curious visitors. So I kind of doubt there's very much left from the family themselves. I'm sure this place has been picked over by treasure hunters and people coming out here looking for a souvenir. There's no fence, no supervision, no protection, just the desert slowly reclaiming everything, which honestly might explain why so much of the original structure is now gone. But imagine the moment law enforcement realized who they had just pulled out from under that sink, which was probably over here somewhere. They came for stolen dune buggies and walked away with the man who would soon become one of the most infamous criminals in American history. In October 1969, officers finally raided the property. They arrested multiple members of the family, but what's wild is at the time they still hadn't fully connected him to the murder cases in Los Angeles. That realization came only after the arrests, as detectives began piecing everything together. And this remote little ranch, tucked into one of the harshest desert landscapes in the country, quietly entered the history books as the place where one of the most shocking crime stories in American history finally began to come undone. After the arrest, Barker Ranch slowly slipped back into the landscape it had been hiding in all along. Over time, the property became part of Death Valley National Park, and today it's protected land. Though out here, protected mostly means just the desert is in charge. When the news of the arrests broke, the rancher's owner, Arlene Baker, was stunned. She had rented the place out to what she thought were quiet drifters looking for a bit of solitude. In later interviews, she said she couldn't believe that the same people who had been fixing fences and hauling water on her property were behind some of the most infamous crimes in California history. Arlene described feeling a mix of shock and relief. Shock that her family's remote hideaway had become part of such a dark story, and relief that the law had finally caught up with the group before they could vanish deeper into the desert. But even after the case was over, the rumors never stopped. For years, people whispered that there might be more secrets buried out here, that additional victims could still be hidden somewhere beneath the rocks and sand. In 2008, forensic teams returned to the ranch and carefully excavated parts of the property, searching for graves, but no human remains were found. But they did uncover bullet casings, a quiet reminder of what life was like out here during 1969. Then just a year later, in 2009, a fire swept through the site and destroyed much of what was left of the original wooden structure. Here. Some people believe it was arson, others think it may have been a careless camper. Out here, the truth is hard to pin down. What remains now are just the stone foundation and walls, scorched, weathered, and slowly sinking back into the desert. The last physical traces of a story that still grip the American imagination. Walking through this place, you feel this weird mix of beauty and darkness. The desert is stunning. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and then you remember the gruesome crimes that were planned here. It's strange how one of the biggest manhunts in California history ended here. An unremarkable cabin in the middle of nowhere. Now, it's almost like the desert swallowed the whole story and left behind just the bones.